Welcome back, everyone. This is Austin with 2FC Tactical. We're located right here in New Prague, Minnesota. Kind of continuing the series here a little bit. We wanted to get into the history of firearms, especially ones that we have examples of. The ones that you see behind me here, some that are in the back and stuff that you can't see at the moment. We would like to highlight those things. Firearms are really pretty cool. There's a lot of engineering that goes into them, and they really do tell the story of humanity, and especially the industrial age as we got into high levels manufacturing and the things that we see today, the precision machining, the welding, the ballistics, the physics, all the way down to cartridge design. It's all really truly fascinating, and it's not every day you get to see examples of it, or at least real world examples of it. So we had started, obviously, in our previous video with those Winchester 1905 model and 1910 models. Very cool, available in the shop, to see, and stuff like that coming through. And it literally does. This stuff comes through all the time. You would be shocked at what's floating around out there. Even stuff that, maybe people don't, put up or have us put up for them. It's still really interesting. They get to bring it. We get to bring it in and see it. I have some people to talk to see if they'd be willing to let me do some content on this for you guys to let you see some things you wouldn't normally see. All right, so we're going to start with the oldest example I currently have. Now this one is a family heirloom of our family, the Reville family, so not available or anything like that. But this is a patterned 1853 Enfield Tower, or Tower Enfield. So this particular one was made in 1863 of that particular design. This is a serial number 25, believe it or not. The interesting thing about this is a percussion cap design, right? Very percussion cap. Now this was some of the earlier versions did have flintlock on them as an option. So you got to think this is, so when we say a Tower Enfield, what does that mean? Well, the Enfield company is still owned by the British the British government and makes guns to this day. They're on the LA-83, excuse me, bullpup. So they are still around. The tower aspect of this is the Tower of London. That was a gun weapons manufacturer, and they made swords, they made spikes, spears, and to this day it's a museum you can go in and see if you're in London. And they had great history with firearms. We're very familiar with the Brown Bess, probably. That's in the United States, at least. The British choice of musket in the American Revolution and the War of 1812. Now, to be fair, that's a bit of a misnomer, because the Brown Bess was a series of rifles that did change over time. But I do find this pattern 1853 interesting, because we're now entering, this is one made in 1863. What's going on, especially in the United States at the time? The American Civil War, of course. Lots of firearm innovation is going on. And it kind of shows, this is really where, in my opinion, the British start to fall behind. We are already experimenting with, like, the Sharps carbine, breech loading weapons, the Burnside, right? Breech loading. You did have the Mississippi rifle that was a rifle. It was muzzle loading, just like this one is. But we were seeing the transition, obviously, to more mechanical, easy to load, easy to maintain, easy to fire, high rates of fire guns. Now, while at the time they were mostly single shotguns, with the exception of the 1858 Henry repeater and 44 Magnum, for the most part, they were muzzle-loading devices. But we are seeing, that new version of a firearm start to come into effect. Obviously, the Gatling gun and so forth. So this is still a percussion cap weapon. You put your percussion cap on here. You would cock it. You would tear your cartridge, pour your powder in, put your ball or Minié round. We started to get the Minié rounds, which were a French design, which had the more pointed version of ammunition that is closer to what we know today. And then, of course, you take your ramrod out and ram it down. This is a rifle, sort of. It's called a rifle, but it's not a rifle like you and I would know it. These are straight grooved rifles, so it goes in a straight groove all the way down the barrel. and two on top, or one on top, one on the bottom, and one on each side. Not the corkscrew that you and I would know of rifling today. So not nearly as accurate as you would get out of a modern firearm. And this is also where they kind of get behind a little bit. We had stuff like the Kentucky long rifle and stuff in the Revolutionary War. The British did have true riflemen with rifled, muskets back then too. Not quite as many as the Americans, and they didn't use them like we did in the Revolutionary War. So rifling in a gun was not new. It had been around, a while, closing in on 100 years. But it becoming standard in guns, moving away from the true musket, that was becoming more common. The Mississippi rifle and all were true rifles, with the corkscrew look. Now, there was some drawbacks to it, and there's a reason why some people shied away from it. It was slower to load. You have to jam that round in tight in order for the rifling to work, and really work it to get it in here, because you're muzzle loading it instead of breech loading it, which is why the Sharps carbine and stuff ended up being such a huge hit, because now you could get the accuracy you could get out of a true rifle without the mundane and tedious task of loading. You can increase the rate of fire. So the British still kind of were holding on to old tactics, as were we, especially in the early parts of the Civil War, where everyone's getting up in lines, right, 25 yards from one another, and just firing volleys into lines of men. This is just under a 60 caliber weapon. This is a .577 caliber a gun. So you got to think at 25 yards, that's devastating to come in contact with. I mean, huge. These were huge calibers. And they went all the way up to 64, 66, 67 caliber guns back then. They thought the bigger the better. Now, of course, we know now bigger can mean slower, less velocity, but it's still devastating, especially at the distances we're talking about in the Civil War and Revolutionary War. This one, we're not quite sure where it came into our family. Where it is an interesting historical piece. This one probably did make its way across the pond. When you start to see these show up in the Americas is in the Civil War, in the South specifically. All the gun makers in the American Civil War were in the North for the most part. The South didn't really have the industry to make firearms, so they had to look beyond that. They had to look beyond what you would expect for gun makers. It has some of the proof marks that you're looking for, kind of on this side of the gun. It's a big boy. But also one of the big giveaways is it was cut down. So these were originally much longer. These were cut down to make them easier to load, A, and B, to make them not quite as unwieldy as you would normally see. So this one most likely was a Southern infantry rifle by someone. And in the Civil War, this is true of the North, not just the South. Pretty much everyone was just trying to get their hands on guns that they could. There wasn't enough guns to go around for the units. So we see literally 50 plus manufacturers, hundreds of different models end up on the battlefield. If you think of Custer's Last Stand, right? When they did an excavation of the site, they found like 20 something different manufacturers present at that one battle. This is post-Civil War. So during the war, I mean, the amount of people making firearms was crazy. Now, of course, getting through the northern blockade to get guns to the south, that was the real trick. But this one does appear to have gotten across. And, these would have been the standard issue rifle for the British all the way up to the Martini Henry, actually. And they would finally make the move away from the, muzzle loading percussion cap to that single shot cartridge, an all encapsulated cartridge breech loading design that you would see in like the Zulu Wars or something like that came up later. It really wasn't, and again, the British were behind when it came to like magazine fed guns. We introduced the Craig Jorgensen obviously in the late 1800s, and then followed up with the Springfield 1903. Those internal cartridge guns became a bit later for the British. This would have been an example of like what you would typically see a British soldier carry at the time. It is very interesting it ended up here, but I thought I'd bring this to you and let you see it. It's very cool. I don't know if you can see, but there is the British Royal Crown and stuff right there. There's 1863. The proof marks that you would see are right over here. The serial number is upside down. Serial number 25. But very cool. And I look forward to bringing you more. Like I said, we'll try to go in order from oldest to newest, but we will interrupt if there's cool things that come to the shop. In fact, we got a couple of things in the shop right now I'd like to show you guys that are a bit more unusual and stuff you wouldn't necessarily come across every single day. But I look forward to seeing you again, and until next time.